Hey, hello everybody. This is Kunal again, and I decided, or I felt inspired to talk about this book again by Jacques Attali, which I've been reading a little bit of, called Millennium: Winners and Losers in the Coming World Order. So, this is where we left off. We were at the theoretical interlude. I read part of it. And I was going to read the rest of it afterwards. So we left off with the introduction of the fact that we have to take a sketchy tour, because it's a bit of a sketchy tour of humanity's memory, because it mixes history and science. And so according to him, at the beginning, there was communication with each other, and that's been going on for 1,000,000 years since language was introduced, I guess. And fire was introduced, I guess. But then the other things, and he gave the timeline. So then we were going to talk about the definitions, and let's get started. I will call any grouping of people that is organized to last: family, tribe, village, city, country, or international organization, a social form. In order to sustain themselves, men in all social forms have had to learn to live with violence, both the violence that comes from other men and that which comes from nature. Now, me, I prefer this violence to that violence, but it just seems unfortunate and unnecessary. But this is reasonable, even though unexpected and extreme at times. All early societies fight these two kinds of violence by means of myths. Okay, so there have always been myths. He talked about earlier the priest and the scapegoat, or the prince, and usually they're fused into one. Like in America, there's the president, and then everyone has their own pastor. Sheep always like to go to the pasture to graze with feel-good vibes. Let's get back to it. All early societies fight these two kinds of violence by myths. These myths express a basic wisdom. Violence between individuals, they seem to insist over and over, is the result of rivalry, itself provoked by confrontation over the same desirable object. The war with Troy fought over Helen is an example. One wants something only if another also wants it. I don't really believe that, but it does stimulate desire, I guess. When there is identical desire, there is violence. Okay. So it seems to be a downward spiral. So anyway, rivalry, usually for same resources, and that causes violence between men. To reduce a rivalry that threatens to destroy a social form. All right? A social form, not human society in general, but just a social form. Men have organized themselves into hierarchies. They make up categories of value and distinction that allow all members of the group to visit their violence upon one person. Scapegoat and... Oh, sorry, this is where he talks about it. Okay. So, men organize themselves in hierarchies and make up these categories of distinction and value, so they can, and this allows all members of the group to visit their violence upon one person, scapegoat and prince, at the same time. That reminds me of the Wicker Man original movie. That whole scapegoat and king concept. By placing the right to violence in a single ruler, order is achieved among the members of the group. Alright, so that's why we have these big tough dogs like Trump, or Bush, or I don't know who are the big tough talkers, you know? These big politicians who speak really hard and get us in this fighting spirit, and then eventually, if you really look at it, they let us down with their actions. But I don't know. I feel like the things I hear about Trump in the news seems to be the things that Trump said he was going to do, and things I agree with, even, you know, like free speech and so forth. Anyway, the order of the sacred is born from, by placing the right to violence in a single ruler, all right? Now we have cops, but it's the single ruler, the government, you know, headed by a decade, by a new president every decade, pretty much. a new king or new ruler. By placing the right to violence and they're not really the ruler, but anyway, placing the right of violence in a single ruler, order is achieved among the members of the group. So yeah, this basically promotes cohesiveness. This cohesiveness in the group, and reduces the threatening violence to the the oligarchy behind the ruler. The order of the sacred is born from this investiture of violence and desire. So from that comes the order of the sacred. Violence caused by the invisible forces of nature now is controlled in the same way as violence caused by men. The selection of an individual who, endowed by the gods with special powers, is sent to the underworld to plead the cause of the living. All right? So, to deal with the mysterious nature, there's another individual, or sometimes we'll find out who that is. But supposedly they're blessed by the God, you know, Jesus Christ, so forth. So now we have in Christian society there was a dead little idol, basically, that served as the individual endowed with the gods with special powers. Is sent to the underworld to plead the cause of the living, right, as sacrifice for our sins. For this reason, in all early societies, the prince and the priest are fused together as a sort of quasi-god, who is then actually or symbolically sacrificed so that the group can survive. Totally what happened in the Wicker Man movie. And that was totally about like this whole Brave New World society that is coming on, you know, the Wicker Man original movie. It is his duty to resolve disputes among men and to intercede with the gods. Okay, that's the priest, and the priest's job, the priest part of the equation. So, like in today's society, I guess we would have the ruler would be the government, and the priest would be the churches, which are non-profit organizations, and no one gets approved for non-profit organization unless they're, you know, serving the same old good old boys club on their agenda. So anyway, that's what we see with the whole feminist churches these whole people are talking about. But there is no orderly society without sacrifice. Okay, so again, back to the Wicker Man, sacrifice. Poor old Sergeant Howie never understood the meaning of sacrifice. There is no orderly society without sacrifice, nor order without disorder. Right? Well, that's generally true, but you know, it's kind of twisted in today. But to function permanently, this sacrifice must be described in a myth that priests repeat and that princes obey, right? So there's always the media telling us what is good and what is bad, and then there's the authorities enforcing those notions, and everybody else is kind of kooky or evil, or a criminal, whatever. All right, so I think that's pretty much it. A notion of the sacred brings order to violence. All right, And I think I'm gonna stop here because my battery might be running low. I did want to finish at least this paragraph or another page, but let's see how much I can do before they cut me off. Ever since the first sedentary social forms, perhaps 10,000 years before our time, there have been three ways to control violence: the religious, the military, and the economic. All right, so I think this is a good place to stop. A good preview. You can start reading if you want, and before I get back to it. But yeah. So this is the what I'll get to back to next time. Ever since the first sedentary social forms, right? Maybe 10,000 years ago, there were three orders, right? The religious way, the military group, and the economic people. And all of them had systems of control for the bulk of the people, to squeeze either their actual life or limb, or their minds and souls, or their worries and mental and emotional states and physical states, economic. So these were the three ways to control people, but they say to control people through violence, basically, or to control the forces of violence by managing it. So yeah, the first mediates. So the religious mediates man's relations with nature and the fact of death. The second, the relationship between social forms, and the third, the relationships within each social form. Okay, and the three ways of controlling violence define an order. Okay, and they're all right then. I think I better stop.